Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Kassandra and today's video is going to be short and sweet. Someone on Instagram asked me what my favorite or most influential self-help or personal development books were, and I figured I would just make a little video about it. I do read quite a bit. I'm always pretty much reading 3 or 4 books on the go. I read lots of different kinds of books and different styles, but over the years I have certainly read a lot of self-help or personal development books. So I was able to narrow down my list to 7 that I think are my favorite, or really are the ones that have affected or influenced me the most. So let's just get started. These are not in any particular order except for this first book. So the first book that I want to mention is the one that if I could wave a magic wand and make everyone in the world read one book and one book only, this is the one it would be. It's The Mastery of Love by Don Miguel Ruiz. So you might be familiar with that author. The author's name, he is the author of The 4 Agreements and also The 5th Agreement. I've read both of those books as well. They're really good, but to me, his true masterpiece, the true groundbreaker for me was The Mastery of Love. And it's not as well known, but to me, it was absolutely transformational. So The Mastery of Love is all about relationships and the way that we behave in relationships. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be a romantic relationship. It can help you in your friendships or in your relationship with your family. However, I will say that I do think it mostly applies to romantic partnerships. So if you're in a long-term relationship, if you're in a marriage, or if you find yourself having a hard time holding on to relationships, if you find yourself in abusive situations, if you feel like you flip-flop with being a victim to the abuser, if you just have some unhealthy dynamics in your relationships, this book is an amazing roadmap to show you the things that maybe you're doing wrong, to help you identify situations that maybe are not the best situations for you. It helps you set clear boundaries, and it really helps you understand where other people are coming from. So when I read this book, I didn't really think I needed to read it. I thought I was already doing pretty well in my romantic relationship. It was the same relationship that I'm in now, 6 years later. But honestly, I don't think I would still be in that relationship today had I not read that book, because it has completely taught me a new way of communicating with others. And it has put a huge highlight on the wounds that we all carry. So old traumas and past hurts from our childhood and adolescence and adulthood, all this baggage and stuff that maybe we think we've dealt with, but that sometimes can surface in our relationships, either with being aggressive or passive aggressive, or being avoidant, or this baggage and this stuff, these old wounds will often get triggered in our romantic relationships because you are so intimate with another person. So it's quite an eye-opener. I found that it was really revolutionary. It helped me look at my relationships in a completely different way, and it was really the first time that I started to consider my relationship to be an opportunity for personal growth and development, personal development. So it really shook up the way that I saw relating with others. This applied to friendships, family relationships, and just my intimate relationship. I honestly feel like everyone in the world should read this book at least once. I've reread it multiple times, and I will continue to reread it because there's always something new that I discover from it. Whether you're a man or a woman, honestly, it does not matter. This Toltec wisdom that he's sharing, I think, is universal and can be universally applied, and we can all benefit from it. So if you're looking for something new to read, I just highly recommend it, especially if you had already read The 4 Agreements and you enjoyed it. In my opinion, Mastery of Love is even better than that. So whether you're already in a relationship or struggling to maintain your relationships, or not really sure why you're single or why your relationships fall apart, definitely give this book a try, The Mastery of Love by Don Miguel Ruiz. Okay, so these are in no particular order. The second book that I'm going to mention is A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. So you've most likely heard of Eckhart Tolle. He's a very well-known spiritual teacher and author. He's also written The Power of Now. I have read The Power of Now. I didn't think it was quite as good as A New Earth. Not that it was bad, but I just felt like it was basically the same book repeated a second time. However, I've met people who think The Power of Now is infinitely better than A New Earth. So, it's personal. Everyone has different taste. A New Earth was pretty transformative and groundbreaking for me at the time, because this was the first time I had been introduced to this concept of the observer. So the ego and the observer. And if you've practiced yoga or if you've been in the spiritual realm, you've probably heard a lot of talk about the ego and how we need to control our ego, or even sometimes people will use language like destroy the ego. And I'm not really a fan of that. I come from a background in psychology, and I feel like the ego is a very vital and important part of our psyche, and it's one that we need to know, understand, and nurture in a way. However, it is important to be able to step outside of the mental chatter of our insecurities, of our fears, of our ego, to be able to observe things from a neutral perspective. So the reason A New Earth was so important for me and why I list it as one of my favorites was because I've kind of struggled with anxiety quite a bit as a child and into my teenage years a lot, and even like early on as an adult. And I almost made my anxiety, it almost kind of developed like a victim complex, like I got very comfortable with calling myself an anxious person. And I don't really want to get into that too much. That can be for another video. But this book really did help me cope with anxiety in new ways. At the same time, I was also introduced to yoga about at the same time that I was reading that book. So as I was practicing yoga more and more, I was also playing around with the concept of detaching myself from the ego and really stepping back from this chatter of the mind and not attaching myself to thoughts too much. So that was really powerful for me. So A New Earth is a book I would recommend if you're someone who does suffer from anxiety or depression, if you're someone that often goes down in those negative spirals. It's kind of hard to explain what those are, but if you've had it before, you know exactly what I'm talking about, where one bad thought just seems to lead to another bad thought, worse and worse and worse and worse, until you feel absolutely powerless and full of anxiety and stress, or really, really depressed because you're caught up in your stories. So not even caught up in reality, but caught up in the stories that you're making about a perceived situation. So most of the time, this is your ego at play. So A New Earth was a way for me to understand what was going on when I was creating these stories for myself, and learn how to just detach myself from it so that I could stay a little bit more sane and a little bit happier. So it was really great for me, and it was also the first book that introduced to me the concept of a cultural wound. So these cultural difficulties that we inherit from our families, from our culture, this baggage that we have on. So it's learning to take or get rid of that baggage and heal it on a personal level, to be able to heal it on a collective, cultural, and global level as well. So definitely highly recommend A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, especially if you feel like you are prone to anxiety or prone to some depression spouts. Of course, I don't want to make any kinds of claims like it'll cure your depression or anything like that. That's really not what I'm saying. But to me, this was a really wonderful way for me to just kind of get control over the situation again, because I found that for me, anxiety is all about a perceived lack of control. So those are my 2 cents. Definitely recommend A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. So the third book is quite different. This is one that I've read not too long ago, only maybe a couple months ago, and it's How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Most likely you've heard of this book. It's very, very old. Well, very old. It's pretty old. And I had heard about it. It was recommended to me by many, many, many people, especially in this like self-help field or in the entrepreneurial field as well. And I always stayed away from it because the title made it sound like it was going to be some kind of like Machiavelli book where you're trying to manipulate people and control people to get your way, and I'm not about that. So I stayed away from that book, and I wish I had read it sooner because the title is really deceptive. That's not at all what the book is about. So How to Win Friends and Influence People, to me, is all about managing conflict. And the way that it helped me the most is I'm kind of stubborn. I'm kind of a stubborn person, and I like to have the last say and have the last word in something. And I'm really good at arguing with people. You know, like I always did really well in school when I had to do debates. That was always a strong suit to me. So how to win friends and influence people is basically how to learn to stop arguing, stop debating people, and kind of take responsibility for your part in a conflict, or to learn to see things from another person's point of view. So for me, it was kind of a harsh book to read because it went against a lot of my natural way of being, or how I was raised to behave, or how I learned to behave. But it really is truly invaluable information. If you work in a team, you know, and at the end of the day, I think we all work in teams in some form or another, you know, even just a family unit, that's working in a team. With your romantic relationship, that's team. If you go to the office every day, you have teammates, colleagues. You need to be able to learn how to speak up your opinion and make sure that your voice is being heard, while also not completely overwhelming everyone and putting them down, and knowing when it's okay for you to say that someone is right or someone is wrong. And really the book is basically saying that you should never tell people that they're wrong. So anyway, I don't want to get too far into it, but to me that was quite a revelation of a book, I guess, and I've been putting the tips to the test. It's awesome. I now understand why it's a classic, why it's sold millions and millions of copies, and why it's been a bestseller for so many years. So How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie is absolutely amazing. Especially, I'm going to specify, especially if you're in a leadership position. So if you happen to be the boss and you have teams, this book is really going to help you identify what it means to actually be a good leader. So being a good leader does not necessarily mean that you have to be the highest authority and have the last say on everything and, you know, micromanage the people around you. So it works for professional environments, and it absolutely does apply to personal environments as well. So in your friendships, just casual acquaintances, if you go to a party, you know, how to make friends with people in the room without totally taking it over or being a wallflower. Honestly, it's great. I'm definitely going to be rereading this book multiple times over my life. I'm sure of it, because it's like 100 tips and there's no way I could remember all of them, but it's excellent. So How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie is the third book I would recommend. The fourth book I'm going to recommend is The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. I read this maybe when I was like 21, like 5 years ago, and I was in a place in my life where I was graduating from school. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't feel confident enough to set goals, because I honestly just didn't really believe that I could achieve any goal that I would set. And The Success Principles was the first book I read that really taught me what positive thinking actually is. It taught me and introduced me to the concept of a vision board for the first time, which was awesome. But then it also went and gave a very practical approach to achieving goals. So the Success Principles is basically outlining all the principles that a person needs to have and apply in their daily life in order to be able to achieve whatever goal it is that they want. So whether that's making $1 million, or starting a company, or starting a family, or traveling to X many countries, you know, whatever your goals are in life, this book lays out step by step exactly what you need to do in order to go achieve them. So this book was really important for me and really great, because it honestly just gave me the motivation I think that I needed to start believing that maybe I could achieve things if I set my mind to it. And that's the kind of thing that's really cliche and sounds really cheesy until you start to apply it and do it for yourself. And then you realize that actually it's not cheesy, it's true. But until you actually start doing things like that and you actually start taking steps towards your goals, when people tell you that, oh, you can do anything you set your mind to, you kind of just roll your eyes at those people and think they're dumb or think that they're fooling themselves, because you know that it's going to take way more than just believing in something for that thing to happen. So Success Principles was a really great combination and hybrid of these two schools of thought, where you have on one side, you have like the law of attraction, the secret, manifesting, and where they're just saying, you have to believe to receive, and you have to create vision boards, and you have to work with affirmations. So that's all great. But then the Success Principles is also introducing and talking about the very pragmatic actions that must be taken in order to reach your goals. So it is, setting a schedule. It is writing down the goals one at a time. It is working with your mentors. It is doing some research, all this kind of stuff. So it was marrying those two approaches to achieving goals. And to me, that's why it resonated really well with me, because I felt like it was very realistic, very doable, and it just motivated me, honestly. And I've read that book multiple times again, because again, there are a lot of principles. So I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but every time I feel like I either need a motivation boost, or every time I'm feeling overwhelmed because I feel like I have too much to do, or I'm not sure what the next step is that I want to take, like I'm feeling like I'm accomplishing a lot, but I'm not really sure if the things I'm accomplishing are actually the things that I want to be doing, I'll reread this book and I'll go through the steps and I'll make sure that I'm really aligning my actions with my visions. Because at the end of the day, you can keep yourself busy all day, you can be working all the time, you can be doing a lot of stuff, but if it's not aligned with what you actually want, what's the point, right? So The Success Principles is a good book for me to refer to whenever I need to check in, or whenever I feel like I need to completely change directions and go on a new track and just kind of start from zero, right? So I need to go through the principles one at a time. So if I was to start a new company, for example, tomorrow, I would open the book and I would go through the steps one by one in order to create my business plan and start putting things in motion and really start to craft my business around the kind of life that I want to live. So I absolutely recommend it to anyone who has a dream and feels like it's absolutely impossible to obtain that dream. Or if you're like me and you're feeling just totally overwhelmed and like you don't know which direction you want to take in life, you're not really sure what you want your life to look like in 10, 20, 30 years, and you're feeling kind of just overwhelmed by the decision process, this is going to help narrow your focus and make you feel really confident that you can accomplish the things that you set your mind to, and you're going to feel like you know a little bit more where you want your life to go. So The Success Principles by Jack Canfield, I highly recommend that one. The fifth book on my list is Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl. So Dr. Viktor Frankl is a survivor of the Holocaust, and he wrote this memoir or this book about his experience in those concentration camps, and also the work and the journey once he left the concentration camps. So Man's Search for Meaning is exactly what the title said. It is an analysis and a thesis almost on what it means to be alive. What is our humanity? What and how do humans attribute meaning to experiences? So from his horrifying experience in those Nazi concentration camps, he really saw the lowest of the low and how cruel and awful human beings can be. And at the same time, he also saw the other side of the coin, where he saw human beings and people gathering together and helping each other out and, pulling each other up. And he was able to observe how each person in that concentration camp viewed their experience differently and lived the experience differently in the camp and when they left the camp. It varied based on the meaning that they associated to that experience. So this book, I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't want to spoil it. I feel like this is really a book that you should take a journey on yourself and read through it. It's not long at all. I think I read it in a day. It's a very, very quick read, but it has never left me. Like, it's a very, very powerful book. And the reason I think this is probably one of my favorite personal development books is this was like my first introduction to the power of meaning. So the reason I found this book so powerful is that it really shook me in a way and made me understand the power of my own mind, the power of my own attitude, and the power of perspective. Because at the end of the day, even though everyone in that concentration camp was having a very similar experience, one person to the next, the way they were reacting to those experiences was widely different depending on the perspective and the meaning they were attributing and associating to that event. So to me, I took that back into my own life and saw that, when bad things happen, because bad things happen to everyone every now and then, that's just the way life is, you can't foresee everything. So when something bad happens, at the end of the day, you are the person who is responsible to attribute meaning to that and associate meaning to that event. You get to decide what it means that this has happened to you. So an event itself does not cause you to feel something. You have to choose to feel something about a situation that is happening to you. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense, but if this feels a little bit strange, like a concept to you, definitely read the book. To me, it was completely eye-opening, and it's a great way to kind of shake off the victim mentality that everyone kind of floats in and out of from time to time. So if you feel like you do struggle with this victim mentality where you feel like, woe is me, poor me, life is always happening to me, why, and you're always kind of talking like that or have that kind of attitude, Man's Search for Meaning really is an empowering book and an empowering concept that even if all these things are happening to you, at the end of the day, you're the only person that gets to decide how you are going to react to that event and what meaning and lessons you are going to take from that event and how it's going to shape the rest of your life. So Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl, I highly recommend it. Again, it's a short read. It's a short read and it's going to stay with you for a long time. One of the best books I've ever read for sure. Okay, I only have two more. So the sixth book is The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. This is a book I always recommend to anyone who is either an entrepreneur or an artist. This book is like a giant kick in the butt for anyone who struggles with procrastination. The War of Art is all about the creative process where you're either, writing a book or creating a piece of art, or you're just working to build your business. Any kind of initiative that is self-driven and self-motivating or self-motivated, you can bet that you are going to run into some resistance along the way, right? You're either going to procrastinate, you're going to start making excuses, you're going to diminish your achievements, you're going to make, there's going to be a million different reasons why you can't do this one thing or why you have a hard time finishing projects that you start. So I'm a huge procrastinator, and The War of Art was really what I needed to read in order to stop thinking of myself as an amateur and start treating myself and thinking of myself as a professional. So he talks a lot about this shift of going from the amateur to the professional, and making that shift of amateur to professional has nothing to do with your status, has nothing to do with the amount of money that you earn or the amount of money that you charge. It has nothing to do with what you put out into the world. It is a mindset shift. So you need to decide that as of today, you are no longer going to be an amateur in what you are doing. You are going to be a professional. So a professional comes with certain sets of habits and rituals, behaviors, and thought processes. So the professional does not procrastinate, gets up at a certain hour every day and just gets to work, always puts the work first. So a professional doesn't make excuses for themselves. I still have to refer back to this book every now and then where I feel like I'm just kind of getting in a rut and I'm not really motivated anymore, or I'm overwhelmed with the amount of tasks that I actually have to do, because I feel like the busier I get, the less I'm inclined to actually work. I get overwhelmed and then I almost get lazy. It's a little weird, but that does happen to me. So whenever it happens, I just open this book to a random page and I just read that chapter or read that page, and I always get a really good boost of inspiration and it puts me back on that right track. So if you are an artist or if you are an entrepreneur, if you struggle with procrastination, or if you struggle with just taking your work seriously and embracing the fact that you are not an amateur, you are a professional, this is a book I highly recommend. So anyone trying to start their own business, you need to read The War of Art. Any struggling artist out there, read The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. It is wonderful. He has another book called Do the Work. I think that's what it's called. I've read that one as well. It's basically the same to me as The War of Art, and I think The War of Art is a little bit better, so I would recommend that one, but Do the Work is also a pretty good book. Okay, the last book in the list is a classic, and I wouldn't say that this is necessarily a favorite book of mine, but it was pretty groundbreaking to me at the time. You've all probably heard about it by now, and that's The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. So The Secret was just the first introduction I had to Positive thinking, really. Positive thinking, the law of attraction, whether you think that's just a bunch of garbage that people make up to, make themselves feel better, that's totally fine. The law of attraction, manifesting, all that kind of stuff is something that I've always taken with a grain of salt. At the same time, it's always something that has worked really well in my favor. I do use affirmations. I do always make sure that I have a positive mindset. I do write my goals down and create a vision board and journal very regularly. I do these tips and tricks that they've laid out in The Secret, and I had never really heard about any of this before. I hadn't been introduced to any of the concepts from The Secret, which is why I'm putting it in the list, just because it was pretty transformational for me at the time. Now, that being said, I probably read it for the first time 8 years ago, and today, if I were to read that book, I don't think it's that great. I don't think it's that transformative, but at the time, because I had never read anything like it or been introduced to this kind of thinking and outlook on life as was presented in The Secret, it was really transformational to me. So if you're not familiar with any of these concepts and you feel like there's this kind of life that you want to live and it's not matching up with the life that you're living right now, give it a try. You can either read the book, or they even made a movie out of it. It's so dumb, but I honestly read that book because Oprah was talking about it, and I used to watch Oprah all the time as a teenager, and she was talking all about The Secret and giving it rave reviews, and I figured, well, if it works for Oprah, if it's good enough for her, it's probably good enough for me. I remember those days vividly because I was a totally different person. I've always been a pretty positive person, but this really just shifted it completely for me and made me feel really empowered and made me feel like I was able to trust the flow of life no matter what would happen. And it's still a concept that I play with today, and still something that I'll refer to, a book that I'll refer to time and time again. Now, I've read so many self-help and personal development books over the years. It does feel like the themes keep repeating over and over, but definitely if you have read very few books on positive thinking and setting goals and designing your life, then for sure read The Secret, give it a chance. And definitely check out the other books that I've mentioned here in this video today. I hope you found this useful. There are, probably a dozen other books that I could have mentioned here because, like I said, I've read a ton of them, but I really wanted to narrow it down and give you as much of a variety as possible. So Mastery of Love, if you want to focus on relationships, War of Art, if you're more interested in entrepreneurship, A New Earth, if you're worried a little bit more about mental health. So you have all these different kinds of tools, but if there are any other books that you're looking for suggestions on, leave me a comment down below. I would love to let you know other books that I've read on each topic. If you want books for creativity, for example, or anything like that, just shoot me a message and I'll be happy to give you any recommendations that I might have. Thank you so very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, please do subscribe to my channel. I put new videos out every single week, and definitely just leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought and let me know what your favorite personal development and self-help books are. Thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon.